Now, we are going to the polls to elect a new president on the 26th of this month. But when you enter the polling booth, you will also be asked to vote on the removal from the Constitution of blasphemy. And to discuss that, I am joined this morning by John Hamill. John, good morning and welcome to Northside Today.
Good morning, how are things?
Things are not bad. John, maybe we could start the discussion. If you could explain to the listeners, some of whom I'm sure are sniggering at the very thought of blasphemy be still on the statute. What is blasphemy?
Well, in Irish law, it's defined as something written or a spoken utterance, which is offensive and causes outrage to a significant number of adherents to a particular religion. So I guess one of the principles that we would advocate is that we should ensure that no person is beneath respect, but no idea is above criticism, and really blasphemy relates to the criticism of religious ideas. So in Ireland we have the Incitement to Hatred Act, which includes incitement to religious hatred, and that really speaks to attacking people. So even if we remove blasphemy from the Constitution, it will still be illegal to incite hatred against people on a religious basis. But what we're doing in removing blasphemy from the Constitution is to make sure that we can criticise ideas as distinct from people.
Very good. Now, I suppose I should outline the fact that John is on this morning advocating for a yes vote, in other words, to remove blasphemy from the Constitution, and John is with Atheist Ireland, so just to remove any ambiguity in relation to that. So, for the purposes of the chat in the next couple of minutes, I will do my best to try and advocate for a no vote. And I suppose the question I would ask, John, is when was the last time that anybody was actually charged with blasphemy in this country?
Well, that's a good question indeed, and as you're implying, it is correct to say that actually no one has ever been successfully prosecuted under our current blasphemy laws, but we would say that one of the reasons for that is that actually the media often self-censor themselves, so often when people from Atheist Ireland are asked to submit, let's say, articles for local newspapers, they are censored or edited just because the media doesn't want to be involved in a blasphemy case, and that's happened to me personally. I was asked to write an article, it was actually about Medjugorje, and in the article I referred to Mary as a carpenter's wife. And the sub-editor concerned thought that was potentially blasphemous. Now, I don't think either myself or the sub-editor thought that there would be a successful prosecution for blasphemy for calling Mary a carpenter's wife. In fact, as I pointed out, it's the Gospel of Mark that calls Mary a carpenter's wife, and anyone who suggests that Mary is not a carpenter's wife, that's the person who's committing a blasphemy.
Well, as far as I know now, and I am open to correction on this, and I don't want to be making your point for you, and far from it, but we were always led to believe that she was Joseph's husband, or Joseph's wife, and that Joseph was a carpenter, so that would, I imagine, make her the wife of a carpenter.
Right, yes. But that's exactly the point.
But my argument is, how could that be blasphemous?
Yes, that's exactly the point. You, me, and the sub-editor who censored that article can all agree that that's not blasphemous. But from the perspective of local media, and in particular print media, it's often the case that newspapers just don't want to be involved in a blasphemy case. So anything that could be considered offensive to their most conservative Roman Catholic readers, they just won't go near it because they don't have the funds to fight a blasphemy case. So even if they're confident that they could win, going to court and paying for the case still is an enormous financial cost and an enormous distraction. And the effect, therefore, is that the media self-censors themselves, and it's happened to me, it's happened to other people in Atheist Ireland. So one of the reasons why there has been no successful prosecution for blasphemy in Ireland is because the media self-censors, and even the largest media organisations in the country do this. Your listeners might be familiar with the Savage Eye, the skit show on RTE with Dave McSavage. That show had a sketch censored by RTE because they thought it might be blasphemous. And it's not just utterances like that. The blasphemy provision in our constitution also supports our censorship laws. So we still have a censorship act here in Ireland. We still have a banned books list here in Ireland. And we can ban books in Ireland if they are considered to be blasphemous.
And John, another question then, I suppose, which arises out of that is, what difference will it make to the ordinary citizen on the street if the blasphemy law is repealed in this referendum, which takes place on the 26th?
Sure. Well, I'm an ordinary citizen on the street, and I think the most important reason for removing our blasphemy provision relates to our international obligations. So today in Pakistan is the last appeal for a Christian lady called Asia Bibi, and it's her last appeal after a number of years on death row. As if she is not successful in her appeal, Asia Bibi will be executed as a Christian lady for blaspheming against the Islamic faith. Now, Ireland, among other countries at the United Nations, has lobbied and encouraged countries like Pakistan to remove their blasphemy laws. But each time that Western democracies do that and criticise other countries for having capital punishment for blasphemy, what we see is the Irish law cited back to us. So what Pakistan did at the United Nations is they proposed the verbatim, precise language from the Irish blasphemy law as something that they cited as best practice to be adopted by United Nations countries. So when your law is being cited by Pakistan as best practice in blasphemy, that's a good indication that you're doing something wrong. And when we launched our campaign, we had a letter signed by 24 people who are the victims of these blasphemy laws around the country. And what they're telling us is that it's much harder for them to remove the blasphemy laws in places like Pakistan, because Pakistan can cite countries like Ireland who have recently introduced a new blasphemy law. So I don't think we should turn our back on Christian ladies like Asia Bibi, who is just about to be executed for committing a blasphemy. I don't think we should turn our back on the campaigners in other countries who are trying to have their blasphemy laws removed. I think we should support those people by removing our blasphemy law.
And that brings me neatly to my next question, John. We'll just say on a European level, how many European countries have blasphemy laws on their statute books?
Well, there's quite a few, but what makes Irish blasphemy law different is that it's new. So if you look at the blasphemy laws that exist in other countries in Europe and around the world, the vast majority of them are hangovers from very old law. And in fact, when Stephen Fry was prosecuted, a complaint was made about Stephen Fry based on his blasphemous comments on RTE. It was only after that made international news that New Zealand realised that they actually had a blasphemy law, so they then went and repealed that. And what makes Irish blasphemy law different is that it was passed in 2009. So we're the only Western democracy that has a new blasphemy law from this century.
Yeah, which is kind of strange. But do you think, John, and I'm probably asking you a question that I should not ask, but I'll dip my toe in the water anyway. Do you think that this is really about removing the blasphemy law from the statute? Or is it about a government that wants to be seen to be separating out church and state?
Yeah, well, I think it's really the former, because every international body that has looked at this, and every constitutional law reform group that has looked at this, even within Ireland, have all recommended that we remove our blasphemy law. And part of the rationale for that is that the primary victims of blasphemy laws are actually religious minorities. So most often when blasphemy laws are used to prosecute and persecute people, it's the prosecution of religious minorities. So in order to adhere to the human rights of both the non-religious and also religious minorities, I think it's a good idea to remove our blasphemy law. And if to position the issue, I think you're right in terms of some of the previous referenda that we've had in relation to marriage equality and abortion. Some of those debates have been positioned as, if you like, secular Ireland versus the older religious legislation that we had. But actually, this time round, the Catholic Church is not supporting this blasphemy law. The Iona Institute is not supporting this blasphemy law. So all of the same forces that were arguing for the religious perspective in our previous referenda are actually in favour of removing the blasphemy law.
Yes, very interesting. And I mean, you at the very outset of your submission, John, you referenced the Incitement to Hatred Act, which I think comes under the Public Order Act, if I'm right. And that, the Public Order Act has been prosecuted in district courts all over the country every day of the week. But incitement to hatred, are we more likely, do you think, to see prosecutions for that? There's certainly, has been more prosecutions in the court for incitement to hatred than there has under the blasphemy law.
Yes, and I think the reason for that is that we can see when we look at specific incidents that it's much more important to protect people than to protect ideas. So if someone incites hatred against an individual or a minority group because of their religious beliefs, then it's wrong to attack people based on their religion. So I believe in the freedom of religion. Whichever religious faith an Irish citizen wants to practice, I don't think that we should interfere with that in any way. And people should be allowed to practice their faith in any way they like, as long as they're not interfering with the rights of others. But that's not what blasphemy is about. The Incitement to Hatred Act prohibits attacks on people, but blasphemy prohibits criticism of ideas. And I think in any open democratic society, people should be allowed to criticize ideas. And when my ideas get criticized, I don't think the correct response that I should have to that is to drag someone off in front of the High Court and have the state impose a fine on them. So, for example, Cardinal Cormac Murphy O'Connor, not too long ago in a television interview, said that atheists are not fully human. So that's not nice for me to hear. That's not nice for me to hear when I'm sitting in my living room with my 4 children. I find that an offensive idea. But when someone offends ideas that I believe in, I don't think the correct response is for me to drag Cardinal Cormac Murphy O'Connor in front of the High Court and have a judge impose a fine on him for saying something that I don't agree with. I think in an open democratic society, I should be big enough and adult enough to deal with the fact that other people disagree with me without getting the state involved. And I think the same is true of the religious. So for sure, there's lots of people who are very sincerely committed to their religious ideas, and I don't want to interfere with that in any way. But if someone disagrees with their ideas, if someone criticizes their ideas, then in a democratic society, people need to be adult enough to deal with that and to understand the difference between criticizing ideas, which is acceptable and important to do, and attacking people, which should be illegal and will remain illegal even after we remove the blasphemy laws.
Can I just bring you back to that statement by the Cardinal, John, because I find that very interesting. No, I'm not saying that I agree with it, but I just find it interesting from the point of view of, and I just want to clarify this, and maybe it might explain a lot of what we're discussing here this morning for our listeners. By virtue of the fact that you're an atheist, that means that you have no religious beliefs. Am I right in my...
Correct, yes.
Correct. Okay, grand. So that means that the Cardinal, under the blasphemy law, is quite entitled to say that on air about you, that you are not fully human, and atheists are not fully human beings. But if you were to say that about the Cardinal, by virtue of the fact that he belongs to a religious congregation, that could be tantamount to blasphemy, am I right?
That's correct. So there's lots of ideas that different people hold dear to them. We see that in the Dáil every day. There's some people...
No, but the point I'm making, John, is that because of the fact that you don't belong to a religious persuasion, that statement can be made about you. But because of the fact that the Cardinal does belong to a religious persuasion, that statement can't legally be made about him.
That's right. It's the ring fencing of religious ideas and the prohibition of criticism against those ideas alone. And so there's lots of ideas and beliefs that exist in the country that people hold dear. Some people are committed to particular scientific ideas. Some people believe in socialism. Some people believe in the free market. There's lots and lots of ideas that are discussed in Ireland every single day. And what blasphemy does is it ring fences religious ideas and say, if you disagree with those, you can be hauled in front of a court and fined €25,000. But if you disagree with any other ideas, that's perfectly fine. And really, I think it's an insult to religious people to say that everyone else can deal with criticism of their ideas except religious people. And that doesn't sound like any of the Catholics that I know. So I know lots of devout and pious Catholic people who have absolutely no interest in imposing their religiosity on anyone else. They have absolutely no interest in the state getting involved in these religious issues to fine people for blasphemy. They just want to practice their own faith in their own way and live a good life. And this idea that we should ring fence only religious ideas and make criticism of those ideas illegal, I don't think that's something that the state should be getting involved in.
Yeah, it seems from what you're saying that the blasphemy laws, from what I can understand of it, is now obviously, John, I have to apologise profusely for not having spent my entire life studying the blasphemy laws, but it seems to me that they were brought in specifically to protect religion, and I might take one little step over the line and said that in Ireland it was probably brought in to protect the Catholic religion, because at the time that they were brought in, that was the predominant religion.
Yes, well, it was introduced in the Constitution, I believe that was 1937, and actually the influence that the Catholic Church had in the first Constitution, I think, is pretty well documented. Was it John Charles McQuaid at the time had a particularly strong influence, and there's lots of hangovers for that. So we still have a clause in our Constitution, for example, that refers to a woman's duties in the home. I think that came from a conservative Catholic influence. We still have clauses in our Constitution that require our president to take an explicitly religious oath. So, for example, in Ireland, I can't be president of this country, even though I'm a citizen like everyone else. A conscientious atheist cannot be president in Ireland because I can't take a religious oath without being dishonest while I take it. I can't swear an oath to an almighty God that I don't believe exists. And the same is true of a judge. According to our Constitution, you can't be a judge in Ireland unless you swear a religious oath, which means I can't be a judge either. I think being honest under oath is a pretty low bar for a judge to get over, and I couldn't be honest while taking a religious oath, which means atheism atheists in Ireland are precluded from the presidency. They're precluded from being a judge. They're also precluded from being the Taoiseach or the Taoiseach, because those are two ex officio members of the Council of State, where there's also a religious oath. And exactly as you say, all of these things date back to the original constitution, which, if memory serves, was written in 1937 at a time when Ireland was really a monotone Roman Catholic state. So whereas the country has moved on, whereas the population in Ireland is very different today than it was then, our laws still have to catch up. And blasphemy is one of those laws that we have that dates back to the original constitution. And that's one of the things that we're hoping we can catch up on in the forthcoming referendum.
Well, that referendum takes place in conjunction with the presidential election on October 26th. John Hamill, thank you so much for joining me on Northside today. It was very informative, John, I have to say. I enjoyed our chat. Thank you.